Hi everyone, it's Lynn. So welcome to block 3 of Quilt Lit 101. So this block, and I'm going to show you this block. So this block we're calling Anne of Green Gables because I loved that when I was I think it was in the 80s. We had those books. So I'm sure they came out before that, but that's when I read them. But I love the Anne of Green Gables, so this is my Anne of Green Gables block. So here's what you're going to need to do, is you are going to need, and remember, these are when you get the instructions, if you've purchased the instructions, and please do if you haven't. I mean, I know you'll probably be able to figure it out with what I'm giving you, but it does help me out. So anyway, if you've purchased the instructions, you'll know that every time that I say fabric number 2, that's always going to be navy in all the blocks, if navy's in that block. So this block has navy, dark violet, it has cactus, which is that really light green, and sour apple. And again, these are all Kona colors, so you should be able to find them and have the exact ones. So what you're going to do first is what you need to cut out first is you're going to need one of the cactus square, and remember, this is a 10-inch block. So if we break these down, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 10 inches, right? Right, 10-inch block. No, I told you wrong. I know it's a 10-inch block. It is a 10-inch block. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, that's right. I just added wrong in my head for a second. All right, so you need a 2.5 inch of the cactus, which is the really kind of light green, and then you're going to need one of those. You'll need 4 of the sour apple, which is that green, and you will need 4 of the navy, which is, this looks black on screen, but it's really navy. So you need one of these 4 and 2.5 inches. Okay, and then you're going to cut 8 of what we're calling dark violet and navy. Okay, so you'll need 8, and these need to be 3 inches. Okay, so that's what you're going to cut out first. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your sour apple and your navy, and you're going to sew those together to make 4 of these units. Okay, and we'll talk about this stuff here for a second. But so you're going to make 4 of these units. Okay, so 4 of those, and those are, if you look at it, make sure this is in the screen. Yeah, it is. If you look at it, that's what we're making, those 4. Okay? After you get that done, what you're going to do is you're going to take your dark violet and your navy, and you are going to stack them on top of each other, right? And you're going to do that with 8 pieces. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to find a writing instrument. Now, you can use a pencil, but because these are so dark, it's kind of hard to see. So what I found is if you use one of the white, like gel pens, it seems to show up better for you. Now, you have 2 choices. And remember, I'm not sponsored by anybody, so I don't have any, kickback in any of this. This is a magic wand. It's Studio 180 design, and literally, it's a 1/2 inch wide stick. Plastic stick, that's what it is. And it's got a groove cut down the center, and I think you can see that groove right there. Can you see what I'm talking about, that groove right down the center? It's just a little line, essentially. And what you're going to do is that line is a 1/4 inch away from this edge, and that line's a 1/4 inch away from the other edge. So when I line up my, and this may be hard to see on this, but when I line up my corner to corner on my stack, see that line is what I'm doing to this corner to that corner, okay? I think you can see that. Then what I do is I take a pen, and this is a gel pen, and I mark on each side of that line. Now I'm trying to do it more than I normally would, so you can see the two lines. And this is one of the reasons I use this white. Now, does it matter because I have a gel pen that it's going to be in it's going to show up or something? It doesn't. I've never seen it do that. The reason that is your sewing line. So all I'm doing is I'm marking my sewing line, and that's where I'm going to end up sewing. Now, I do want to say you can do this with a regular ruler. So you would just take your regular ruler and you would line up corner to corner a 1/4 inch so that this edge is a 1/4 inch away. You would mark your line. Then you would turn it around or turn this around. Probably easier to turn this around. And then you would do it on the other side. Corner to corner. And it helps if you have a ruler that has one of those 1/2 inch extra, you know, kind of things. That helps. But you can do it with anyone, honestly. Or you can mark the center line first and then do the two other sewing lines. Just remember that when you're sewing on the two opposite lines. And that's going to look like this. So I've sewn with white thread so you can see it. You know, those are the two lines. Okay, then what you're going to do is you're going to take your ruler, okay, and your rotary cutter, and you are actually going to line up your ruler. And what you're doing is you're lining it up on those two lines. You're lining the one sewing line up on your line that you sewed on. And then you're making sure that your ruler is lined up corner to corner, and then that's where I'm going to cut. Okay? Zoop, zoop, cut. So you're going to do that for all 8 of the stacks that you've done. Okay? All right. Now, after you do that, you've marked it, you've sewn it. After you do that, you cut it apart. And you get 2, which is nice. So now that you have 2 of these, right, what you're going to do is you're going to press them, and I always press to the dark, so navy's darkest, I press to it. That way it's easier when they all match up, and I'll show you that in a second. Now, if you do have one, again, this is one of these tools, no sponsor, this is just a tool I like, okay? And it does make things easier. So, and I use it a lot. I use this little block lock ruler. I think I only have 2 or 3 block locks, and this is the one I use the most because it's just easier to measure stuff. Now, what you do is you take your block lock, and this has a groove in it. Like you can see that it's like routed out. So you can even, I mean, it's a good 1/4 of an inch probably routed out. And you can see that gray kind of frosted area. That's where you're going to put the seam, okay? You're going to line up the seam, and I always do it backwards. Okay, there it is. So you're going to line up the seam. So the edge of the seam is going to fit in that little routed area, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you. So this needs to be finished at 2.5 inches. So I need to trim it. Now, it's pretty close to 2.5 inches, but really successful blocks are ones that are cut accurately, pressed accurately, and sewn accurately. And if you want to have all these cute little pinwheel points, you want to make sure you're pressing and sewing accurately. That's the key to it. I'm just telling you, it's kind of, I mean, quilting's kind of meticulous in that aspect. Now, I teach a lot of classes where I'm like, I don't care how it cuts. This class or this type of sewing, yes, it does matter how you're cutting, how you're sewing, and how you're pressing. So this is a nice little tool because what it does is it allows me to line up the 2.5 inches. See, this is 1 inch to 2.5 right there. So, and I can see that there's fabric on the outside of that line. I want it to be right on the line. But what I allow this block lock to do is I'm just cheating in a little so that when I trim this, I know that eyeballing, and see, it's just so, I mean, that's just dust, essentially, that I'm trimming away. But what I know is that I've eyeballed that where there's just a little extra on this outside line. The beauty about the block lock is it allows me to turn it around and slide this side to where now it's right on the line, because I knew the key is, and I'm going to show you how to do this with a regular ruler as well. The key is that when this is right on the line, I can trim it, and I know that that corner is solid. That corner is exactly what it needs to be. And yeah, it's just dust. You feel like you're trimming away. But now this is exactly 2.5 inches. Exactly. So because I've cut it that precisely, I know that it's going to end up well. Now, if you do not have one of these cool little block lock rulers, and all you have is a regular ruler, you can do the same thing. The key is I'm using a ruler that's got a strong line down the center. This happens to be an OmniGrid. It's 9.5. This is one of the rulers I grab quite often. I'm going to do a cute little video, I think, of my favorite rulers, because there are certain rulers that are used for certain things. Now, I think you may be able to see this a little bit better. So notice when I'm lining this up, where block lock worked for me because it already had the groove and it kind of sunk that seam into the groove. So what this one does is it allows me to line up that where the two pieces are sewn together. I'm lining up that diagonal line right against those two pieces, right? And I know that I am a little bit, like this is my 2.5 inch. I know that I'm not too far, like that line isn't off of fabric. And I don't want it to be yet. I want there to be a little fabric beyond that 2.5 inch line for my first cut. Okay? And the reason I'm doing it for this cut is because I want to make sure that I get a really strong corner. That's the key. I want a really strong corner that I know is 90 degrees. I just know it because I've spent time making sure that this lined up correctly. Now and it moved on me. There you go. Okay, now once I have that, I'm going to trim this corner. Okay, and again, I'm trimming dust. Turn it around. Now this is when I line up exactly on that 2.5 inch line. And so I'm looking at 3 places. I'm looking here, I'm looking here, and I'm looking on this diagonal. And I'm making sure that I'm just making small little adjustments till I make sure that they're all lined up. Now, because I know this corner is solid, I've already trimmed this. This is just my finishing trim. And the reason I always leave a little bit, and be careful if you're holding, don't go crazy. It's a sharp blade. Now I know that this is exactly 2.5 inches. So this just takes, and again, this is one of those, you feel like you're trimming away dust, but it really does make a difference. So that's what I wanted to show you today, because we haven't done half square triangles, and I wanted to take time to just show you how to do half square triangles. Now, the next step in our block here is we need to you're going to continue and do that for all 8 of these, which is going to give you 16 triangles. You need 16 because each of these corners takes 4. All right, so now I'm going to look at the picture and see it says it's got the velvet or the violet and the navy, violet, navy. Violet, navy, so navy's in this bottom corner, and violet is going to bump up against that. But what's nice is because I pressed to the navy every time. In other words, when I pressed with the navy folding over the seam. Because I did that, when I match these up, you will find that they nest really well. See how they nest? They bump up next to each other and they nest really well. And when they nest really well like that, sewing a 1/4 inch seam right here is super easy because they're already kind of locked into each other. Do you see what I'm saying? So you're going to continue and make 8 of those little, and just pay attention every time you're sewing that navy to the violet. You're going to sew them like this, like if I think of the violet being up, down, up, down, okay? So you're going to continue to do that. Once you do that, you are then going to sew them to each other. And how I sew them to each other is, again, because I've pressed that navy to the dark, when I line these up, you will notice that navy will lock into, see how it bumps up against it? It locks into that other seam and it'll allow me to sew. Now, when I'm sewing, and I want you to pay attention to this, notice how, if I want really good points in the center, notice how that white line, I'm going to bring it up closer to the camera. See how that long line kind of crosses that X in there? That means when I open this up, that is going to give me that beautiful point that I'm looking for, right? So it's all in accuracy, y'all. So this allows me to cross that little point right there. And when I cross that little point that way, it gives me, same thing on this one. See, that's even better. It just gives me that accuracy when I open it up. I have those strong little points right there. Okay? Now, you're saying that's a bulky seam. Then you would go back through and you would press this open and spin it, and it's not big. Then you can press these open and it's not a big deal. Do. I would press that like that, spin it. Do you see how that's spun? I think it's kind of hard to see right here. And then when I press that open like that, I would hit it with an iron. Then it allows that bulk to not be there. I mean, it's always going to have some bulk because it's, it's 8 pieces of fabric coming together in one little point. Now, some people press all of their seams open. As a long armor, I think that is a very dicey habit. Not that you can't do it. You can totally do it. You can do what you want to do. It's your quilt. I just think it's a dicey habit, and here's why. And as a quilt appraiser, here's why. That weakens that. You've only got thread holding that together. If you press them all open, the thread's the only thing that's holding that together. It's not the folded part of the seams, and they just break. They break, and then you get holes in your quilt. So they just don't last as long as if you do. All I'm doing is making a mess, y'all. Okay. See, a little dust. All right, so then you're going to start lining up your block, and you're going to start sewing it together. So you're going to do this and this. And then, so you're going to sew one of these strips that you just made with the green touching the cactus, and then the sour apple and the navy on this side. And then you're going to sew this to this, and then this unit to this unit, and you'll get this. And then you sew these 3 together. So you see, the toughest part of this block, I mean, because we've done these center things twice now, so those should be no worries, no big deal. But the thing about this block, and what I love is, didn't you think last month when we just changed the piecing on that one strip, how different it made that block look? I just think it's really powerful how these can just really be interchanged. But I'm building precept upon precept. I'm building your foundation to where you're seeing how to do this stuff well so that you have these cute little points exactly the way you want them. So this is your Anne of Green Gables block. And of course you sew this to this and this to this, and you have a whole block. And then it looks like something you can't see behind me. All right, so Anne of Green Gables, get to work on it. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you don't have the pattern, please purchase if you can. And the link is in below. Hopefully this will be interesting and fun. And I look forward to seeing you on the next block. Thanks.